Hey everybody, welcome back to the JPU Show, the show where we give you practical and honest advice and tips and tricks for aspiring and veteran podcasters from the founders of the Jax Podcasters United group, like myself, your host, Badr Milligan, and I've got my co-host, the big brain, Blythe Bromleve, here with me. What up, Blythe? How you doing?
I'm doing good. Hello.
Hello. Be back for another episode. And today we are talking about, well, actually, let me take a step back. This topic comes to us from one of our meetups. We had someone that we took a couple of questions. We did a Q&A round, it wasn't really lightning round, but we did a Q&A round at our last podcaster meetup here in Jacksonville. And we got through a lot of questions. I kind of regret not recording that segment, which is kind of strange considering we're podcasters and we typically record everything. Anyways, lesson learned. But one of the questions that we got that we thought would make for a good video and maybe a fun concept for this one, we're doing something a little different with this one, is we got the question of to add video to your podcast or not. Should you include video in your podcast? Should you make your podcast a video podcast? So that's our goal today. Our goal today is to present both sides of the argument using our personal anecdotes, our personal experiences, our thoughts on the topic, and hopefully help you arrive to a decision if you haven't already made a decision yet, whether you should include video or not. And I wanted to do something a little fun because the full transparency, the full honesty is that you're probably listening or watching this episode on YouTube. So clearly we're advocates for video. I do video on my personal podcast. I know Blythe does as well, but we also maintain an audio only podcast version as well. So I thought to make this a little interesting is that I told you that I wanted both of us to debate both sides of the argument. You decided to represent and debate the pro video angle, and I was going to represent just the audio only angle. And I think that'll be a fun time to see what we come up with. You know, I'm playing devil's advocate and you're just being you. So, or being representative of what you already do.
Argument.
Okay, so what I want to do is give both of us 2 minutes on the clock. You got 2 minutes to present your argument, is what I would say. And then we'll meet in the middle and see what we come up with.
This is kind of new. You're just springing
I'm springing it in on you, all right? Keeping you on your toes. It'll help us keep a concise episode, all right? A succinct episode. So do you want to go first or should I go first? The listeners don't know this, but we just recorded a very long episode where you did 99.9% of the talking because it was about SEO, which you should check out. Reminder to ourselves, release this episode after the SEO episode, so the reference is good. But anyways, would you like to go first or second?
I can go first. I host a lot of solo shows, so I have no problem talking for long periods of time. I think it's the ego that plays a role. Okay.
Okay, wait, hold on. All right, 2 minutes on the clock. You have 2 minutes. You don't have to use the full 2 minutes.
Well, I won't even need the full 2 minutes. Okay.
Boom, go.
All right, let me start with why video should be added to your podcast. And that is from a few different angles. One, and probably the most important angle, is the distribution aspect. You need to be thinking about where you are going to send your show as soon as it's done. If you are standing around and hoping that someone is going to discover your podcast, it's frankly not going to happen. Discoverability is the biggest issue with podcasting, and it has been for quite some time. To alleviate this, you have to be the promo of your own show. And to be the promo of your own show requires email marketing, it requires social media distribution, a combination of the two, or sending your show to YouTube. YouTube is the second largest search engine on the planet, and because of that, they have their stuff kind of worked out. From an SEO perspective, if you listen to the SEO episode, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But from a search engine discoverability perspective, the algorithm on YouTube is far superior to really any other content channel. I would argue that TikTok is a very close second to YouTube. And so using those two mediums, you would not be able to put your show on either of those two platforms unless you have a video component. Now, some folks will say, oh, you should take the audio version and just throw up a screen grab or throw up a little audiogram. I personally don't like those things. If I know that I am looking at my podcast player and I know a new show or one of my shows has released a new episode and I know that they have a YouTube channel, I say, great, thanks for the reminder. I'm going to YouTube and I'm going to watch it instead. Even if it's just two talking heads, I just prefer to watch it. I don't think you need to jump through a bunch of different hoops with adding all of these B-rolls and, all of these other, added things that just complicates it. But I think if you have a situation like ours, where it's two talking heads, there's only the upside of putting your show on a visual platform and then having the ability to have a video component. It's going to help with your social media distribution. It's going to help with discoverability. And it's going to also help build trust, because in the world of AI, in the world of the content that we are creating in today's world, people want to know that the content that they are watching and that they're engaging with is coming from a real person.
Well said. I should have. I was going to stop you at the 2-minute mark. You clocked in at 2 minutes 23 seconds, but you were on such a good roll. I didn't want to interrupt you, which is what happened at the podcaster meetup. I think I was like, all right, 1 minute response for everything, but I was like, oh, these are really good answers. Anyways, as you can tell, we value the content. We value the strategies that we share. So I'm going to see if I can do it on mine under 2 minutes and 22 seconds. So here we go. All right, so my goal is to showcase the benefits of doing an audio-only podcast. For starters, let's get the most important thing out the way. It's less money. With audio only, you're having less equipment and software to buy, less maintenance to worry about. You can do an audio-only podcast with 3 things: a cheap mic, a free editing software like Audacity, and you need a hosting platform. And if you ever need to hire someone, it's a lot cheaper to get them to edit audio and not do video. Other point, complexity in editing. It's less of a learning curve doing an audio-only podcast or editing an audio-only podcast. Look, if you've ever looked at video editing software, it's a lot to take in. All right, there's a lot of complexity to editing video and making it seem seamless. You're also going to have to learn how to work a camera equipment, lighting, learn new software, obviously. With audio-only podcasts, you have a simpler workflow. You can hide a lot more mistakes and edits because you don't have to worry about visual cues or making a funny face or something like that. And it's less time setting up equipment. You don't have to set up a camera, a light, microphone, your whole setup. Audio only gets rid of all of that visual cues that you got to worry about. Also, time. Time is a big factor. I think it rolls into that. Video is going to require more time, whether that be from setting up to editing to publishing. If you're going to offer both, well, now you got to think about, are there things in the video that don't correlate or translate to audio? That is a decision to make. And if we're talking about being a good podcaster that puts out consistent quality content, consistent being the key phrase, I should have that second, but consistent content, is adding a video component going to complicate things to where it's negatively impacting your output, where you're spending more time trying to get across the learning curve or making a video work, where you're kind of disregarding where your schedule is falling off. And last but not least, 2 minutes. All right. Oh, I had one. You know what? Oh, stop me at the 2-minute mark. Why do I get? Why does the ref stop me? Okay. Can I go and just share my last one because I'm almost there. Last but not least, I think you should ask. The most important question to ask is, do you want to do it? Is it the right fit for you? Do you even want to be on camera? Does being on camera make you shy? Is it going to mess up your flow? Are you going to be able to function on the camera? Does your audience even care to watch video? I mean, does your podcast need a visual component? I will admit, for the longest time, I was audio only, but in all reality, comic books, which I cover in pop culture, it's a heavily visual thing. I mean, it's what I talk about, the visual medium. So it made sense for me to move over or to incorporate video. So yeah, I think you have to ask yourself, is this the right fit? Does video make sense for me? Am I ready for everything that comes with it? Both the monetary aspects of it, the time, the learning curve. And I loved and I like this question that I've seen asked is, are you ready to produce a weekly TV show? Because that's kind of what it comes down to, like now granted, it's not a full production. I think there's ways to make a manageable video podcast, but there's a lot more just things to work. Lighting, like, do you know anything about lighting? Do you know about cameras? So that's where I'll stop. Clearly way above the 2-minute mark. Thank you for the extra timer.
Well, I did ruin your flow a little bit when I was aggressively pointing
Well,
at
I
my
was
wrist and
racing to the finish
non-existent
line.
watch.
I was racing to the finish line.
So I hear I hear the, I don't want to say complaints or concerns or challenges around, I don't want to be on video, I don't want to be camera ready. And I will tell you, the most successful YouTube channels that I've ever seen or that I watch regularly, they never put their face on camera. So I would, but that's adding, I'm actually going to argue against myself because that's adding an extra complexity to your podcast. But I will argue with myself again. Oh, go ahead.
Really quick, you're talking about YouTube videos where they're showing graphics. They've got images. It's kind of like a presentation, a video presentation.
Yeah, it's almost you take the audio file and then you just overlay the corresponding image that matches with whatever you're talking about. Maybe your Game of Thrones is a perfect example of this. You know, maybe you're talking about 3 different things that happened in an episode over the course of a 12-minute video. Well, you could just show that same image. It's probably not best practices for YouTube, but if you wanted that, if you were doing a game of, let's say, House of Dragon, recap, then you could use screen grabs from that episode and not go through jumping through all the hoops of, putting yourself on camera, getting all the lights and things like that. Alternatively, you could just, I would say I use a tool called StreamYard, and I can add in the B-roll that I'm going to use. B-roll meaning the images of the video that I'm going to show, that I'm going to be talking over. I can add those in as I'm talking. So as long as I have those things that I want to show bookmarked, or maybe I keep them in a Google Doc where they're linked, and so I know, at what point to click on that link and share my screen. We've shared our screen on these episodes previously. And so using StreamYard has really helped me kind of YouTubeify my episodes. And I've really been doing it very heavily on this NASA series. That it's a 5-part episode series. It's NASA. Like, of course, I could talk at length in an audio format, but the visual side of things, to really hammer home the complexity and the scale of these things that are being built and shot up into space, like the visual method goes a long way. So using StreamYard, I'm able to show that visual, explain it for the podcast audience, and then after that video is done, I don't really have to do much editing. I could take that video and publish it. I do send it to an editor where he adds in, the host read ads and an intro and an outro, but that's the extent of what he's doing. And then after he does that, he just strips the audio from that same file. So it's not like, you're doubling your work or anything like that. You're just adding, just one extra step where you have the video that's already done. You could just screen share and record it that way using a tool like StreamYard, and then just pull the audio from that video file. To me, there's ways to not complicate it, but to your points, like, you do have to, StreamYard, I would argue, is very easy to learn, very easy to use, but there is still a learning curve. There's also a learning curve with editing audio too. So, I mean, depends on where you want to start. But I think the more important question is, how are people going to find you? How are people going to find your show? Because if you're making 10 episodes that you spend audio only and you're not doing any kind of social media or email marketing or website, if you're not doing any of that, it's going to be incredibly difficult for people to find your content. At least with starting with video, you have options.
Agreed.
And that was my primary reason of starting with video, is to have those options.
I guess this is where I will argue with my own point, which I expressed in the beginning. We both incorporate video into our personal shows as well as this show. I mean, if you're listening to the podcast version of this, I literally just stripped the audio from the video, like Blythe had mentioned. Now, what I would recommend, because I do agree with all your points about having video and it being a great marketing tool, a great way to promote your show, have promo material. There's nothing like having sometimes a visual to, like you said, if you have a point or a specific topic, having a visual component or showing what you're talking about, show don't tell sometimes comes into play. And I think what I find value in is I don't do a lot of heavy editing in the video versions of my podcast.
Okay.
Where I think, play around and really get kind of fancy with the editing is in the short clips. And I think that's my advice is make it easy, right? Like, maybe you don't want to edit an hour and a half video and incorporate B-roll everywhere, and as well as simultaneously edit the audio and things. Well, just take a bite size. Can you edit a 30-second or 1 minute video for Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts? Fine. I think that's where I gravitate towards. Is I take the video and I try to make it bite size, where I'm trying to give someone a hook so they can check out the full, the full content itself. And you brought up a lot of benefit to video, but why not just record video and just strip the audio and work with that if you only want to be a video or audio only? But there's something about at least having video in case you want to use it, if you find a use for it. I don't see where the not benefit, but the disadvantage is in at least having a camera set up. Maybe you don't need all the fancy equipment. Maybe you just use your iPhone, and maybe you just have a ring light.
Well, I'll give an example of, how you can, because you're really, when you're talking about adding video, it's not, of course, it's the distribution. That's sort of the marketer in me that is thinking about that first. But there were years ago, I listened to, and I might have told you this story, but I was listening to Princess Diana, outfit, her famous outfits that she had worn. And it was a podcast episode, but they created posts to go with the podcast. They linked it in the show notes. They mentioned it frequently throughout the episode. But it was the first instance that I was listening to the podcast episode and I had the blog post also open.
Wow.
And so as they were talking about these different outfits that she wore to famous events, I could see what the outfit that they were talking about and just scrolled with the show as if they were talking about it. And so I remember that being a really powerful way to show off your content in a different format, but it's also a complement to the content that you're already making, if that makes sense. That, to me, I think anybody could do that. Adding, I don't think you can add images in a Buzzsprout. I don't think you can do that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I don't believe so. What I've done is I will upload it to a photo to Google Drive or something, and I'll just have the link to that, and I'll make mention of in the show. Hey, I got a link to this thing I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah.
But with video, you kind of eliminate the need for that. But I do see your point. If you do want to stick to audio only, there is ways to make it a multimedia experience.
Yeah, and one more thing too, if you don't want to do video, but you still are thinking about the distribution side of things, there's no reason why you still can't make a short form clip like what you're talking about, and just don't be on camera. Just have images that you have rights to, or video clips that you have rights to. Use those in your recap. Yep. Make a short, 30-second, a voiceover as you're talking, and you don't have to put your face on the camera. You can let the images speak for themselves. And so that's another way that you can think about. You can still capitalize on the distribution side of things, but only focus on, creating a really great audio episode versus trying to learn how to edit a video.
I remember when I started dabbling in video, and I took and I did exactly what you said. I didn't have a camera, but I knew I had audiograms that I got generated in Buzzsprout, and I would just edit collages. I would just do it was a fancy PowerPoint presentation. It was very rudimentary and simple editing and showing a graphic and it pans and things like that. But I immediately saw a positive impact because I was getting messages from people on these platforms that are sharing it, Instagram in this example, where they were like, hey, this is cool that I get to, you're showing this visual representation of what you're talking about. Now, granted, I think it goes to my point where it makes sense for my show because I'm talking about a visual medium. I'm talking about comic books. I'm talking about the art. I'm talking about the action, things that are happening. I think your Game of Thrones and House of Dragons example is a perfect example where, having a visual component to showcase and really drive home the point of a clip or, your episode goes a long way. But I think at the end of the day, it is like most of us are doing podcasting as a passion hobby, as a side hustle, as a second thing to our other thing. So I think what I want to stress is the importance of, can you make it work? Is it going to distract you from being consistent, from putting out quality content? I think always put the quality content and ensuring that you're engaging with your audience first and foremost, whether that be audio only or video. But that's kind of like where podcasting is heading to. It is video, and I think there's just a lot of benefits to going with the flow, but making it work. You don't need to do a full production setup.
No, I mean, if I was an audio only
Oops.
podcaster interested in making distribution clips, because frankly, no one is going to hear about your show unless you have a distribution plan in place. That means email marketing. That means if you have one of these things, you should be sending it to YouTube, you should be sending it to social media, and you should be creating a newsletter for your audience. If you do 2 out of those 3 things, then you're well ahead of the majority of creators. But to make it a little bit easier on yourself, there's a lot of debate around sort of AI tools and their use and their, I guess, longevity. But it's never been easier to make content online. And where these AI tools really shine is taking the content that you've created and giving you an extra pair of eyes or an extra pair of ears on the stuff that you're making. So for example, you have an audio only podcast that you want to create a social media friendly clip for. Take the transcript of your podcast, upload it to ChatGPT, and ask it to write you a 30-second script based on this transcript of what an audience member is going to take away. What they give you, you might probably, and you should, tweak it, edit it, put it in your own voice, but at least you're giving the groundwork to these programs to create something that's in your voice, that's in things that you have said or things that are said during the show. And then you can use a tool like CapCut. Frankly, if you're on social media, you got to learn how to do video editing. And so even if it's on your phone, CapCut, I think to me is fantastic. We both use Camtasia. I do love Camtasia still. CapCut is just really, really beneficial from a desktop environment to a mobile environment. Camtasia doesn't have a whole lot of mobile editing that is useful to me. So I, just trying not to learn all of the different programs. I'm trying to stick with one for a little while and just learn the intricacies of that program. But you can add up a bunch of images, use that script that ChatGPT helped you create, because you might think, oh, it's a 30-second video, or oh, it's a minute long video. A lot of times those are the hardest to make. Those are the easier ones to make versus like a 20-minute one where you can just shoot from the hip and, talk about anything you want. When you got to get in 30 seconds, every word matters, every second matters. And oftentimes that can be more challenging. And so use some of these tools to help you get there faster.
Well said. So in closing, to answer our original question, to video or not? Should you include video in your podcast? I think if you were to ask us, yes, because we have video in our podcast. We've shared some of the benefits from it. We have found benefits and return on investment in incorporating video, but you don't have to. If it doesn't fit your show, if it's not something you want to do, then you don't have to do it. I think having an audio only podcast is still a viable way of podcasting. You are giving me.
Well, yeah, I'm giving, because what's going to happen is if you don't have a distribution plan in place and you're only focused on audio podcasting, then you're going to get really frustrated and you're going to be one of those statistics that quits. Overwhelming majority of podcasts, more like 90% of podcasters quit before 10 episodes. So we don't want you to be one of those statistics. And so you just have to have a realistic mind frame that discoverability has been the biggest problem in podcasting. It remains one of the biggest problems in podcasting. And so to get around that, you have to have a distribution plan in place. And is that distribution plan going to include video or not, I think is probably the better question, because you can still do an audio only podcast, but had the video clips to get that distribution.
Agreed. I'll go ahead and concede on that point, and I will double down on the fact that there are so many tools to make video a reality and somewhat easy. You just got to figure out how it'll work for your show and how far you want to take it. I think that is, whether that just be bite-sized things, only focusing on video for promo items and your show is mainly audio. But I think to Blythe's point, having a solid plan in place of how you're going to promote your show without video components, seeing as how it's only growing in size and attention and priority. You may have an uphill battle, but it's not impossible. So I guess once again, it comes down to what you want to do with your show. What are your goals, and how you want to proceed? How much you want to, make it difficult or easy on yourself. With that said, let's go and turn the tables on our listeners and subscribers. Let us know what you thought about this. Do you have video in your podcast? And if you're someone that recently started incorporating video, I would like to hear what finally maybe put you over the edge. What made you decide I need to go ahead and do video? And vice versa. If you're someone that is doubling down, I'm an audio only podcast and I'm not going nowhere. I'm not incorporating video. I'd like to hear why. So let us know your thoughts on this. Let us know if you're pro or against video and podcasting. We'd love to hear from you, whether that be in the comments in the YouTube section or fan mail. If you're listening to the podcast version, there's a link to send us fan mail in the show notes. We would love to read what you got to say. But that's everything we got for you. Thanks again for tuning into the JPU show. I'm Badr. That was Blythe. We'll catch you around. All right. Bye.